It's time for another episode of the Cattle Innovation Station podcast. I'm your host, Baxter Whitworth, and as always, joining me today is your other host, Paul Hayes. In this episode, we're going to be discussing how to increase efficiency in your operation, increase income in your operation, and ultimately increase your profit. Welcome to the Cattle Innovation Station podcast,
bringing you the innovative new ways of the cattle industry.
We're your hosts, Baxter Whitworth and Paul Hayes. Together, we're going to be interviewing leaders within the cattle industry.
Here on this podcast, our focus is honoring God and innovating the cattle industry. Get ready to listen, learn, and laugh as we help innovate the cattle industry.
Let's get innovating. Have you been looking for a place to buy top quality AI sire semen or collectible of your own? Well, look no further than Elgin Breeding Services. Located in Elgin, Texas, Elgin Breeding Service is not only one of the best breeding services in the business, but also has superior customer service. Contact them at ebsbull@elginbreedingservices.com or by phone at 512-285-2019. Again, that's 512-285-2019. And visit their website at elginbreedingservice.com. I want to welcome everybody back to another episode of the Cattle Innovation Station podcast. It's not only a new episode, but a new season. A year ago, on June 1st, we dropped our first episode ever for the Cattle Innovation Station podcast, and now we're back. So, our guest today is Dr. Jason Cleere. Dr. Cleere is an associate professor in Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Beef Cattle Specialist stationed at Texas A&M University in College Station, where he develops and implements educational programs to increase production efficiency and profitability of Texas beef cattle producers.
Dr. Cleere has a bachelor's and master's from Texas A&M University and a PhD from Texas Tech University. In June 2005, he transferred to College Station to serve as a Texas A&M Livestock Extension State Beef Cattle Specialist. He works to coordinate statewide beef cattle extension education efforts, as well as conduct regional education programs. In addition to these efforts, Dr. Cleere coordinates the annual Texas A&M Beef Cattle Short Course that attracts over 2,000 participants each year. The program has grown into one of the largest beef producer education programs in the U.S.
Dr. Cleere also supports the Texas 4-H livestock program by serving in many administrative roles in 4-H programs. He is a member of numerous agriculture associations and owns a purebred cattle operation in Madisonville, Texas. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Cleere.
Thank you, Baxter, and thank you, Paul.
Yes, sir. Well, we're excited to have you. We have a great number of topics we want to talk about today. I know they won't all fit into the first episode because we're splitting our episodes into 2 episodes a month, but hopefully we'll get to talk a lot about budgeting for ranch and increasing profit and efficiency, and I know that's an area you're well versed on, so I'm excited for that. Paul, you want to help us get to know our guest today?
I would love to. With the short bio we just shared about you, we learned that you are most definitely an Aggie, so I'd like to know what your favorite Aggie tradition is.
You know, for me, Paul, I think the tradition of, when you greet somebody on campus, saying howdy, to me, that symbolizes the Aggie spirit and the friendship and camaraderie. And so I still love to do that when students walk up to me. Some just kind of look at me, and say, what is this guy doing? But I think that's important, and we still see a lot of students that still honor that tradition, and so I really enjoy that aspect of it, and then again, you really enjoy the traditions of the things like the Memorial Student Center and the dedication we have to our armed services and those that have lost their lives, and so there's a lot of different traditions that go along with it. I think at the end of the day, Paul, respect and integrity are a couple of our core values at A&M that I think are very important and a part of our tradition. And so, again, there's a lot of them, but that gives you kind of an insight of that. Yeah, I did get one degree at Texas Tech, and you had mentioned Dr. Herring earlier. He was actually on my PhD committee when he was out at Texas Tech many years ago, and I enjoyed my time out there. I grew up in East Texas, and so I got my background was cow-calf, kind of like yours, Baxter, and so I wanted some feeding experience, and so that's why I went out there. But I had the opportunity to come back to A&M, and I came running. So been blessed with that opportunity.
Yes, sir. Always
And
great to have a fellow East Texan on the podcast.
There you go. There you go. Now, I grew up, Baxter. I'm kind of not a true East Texan, all right, because I grew up in Anderson, okay, and so Anderson is just west of Interstate 45, all right. So when you get to be a true East Texas, you're in the Pine Curtain over there on east of I-45. So I guess Baxter he's the true East Texan of the group, but I definitely grew up in the eastern half of the state, so.
Right. Sounds good.
well, no matter where you live in Texas, we all love a good steak. And how do you like yours cooked?
Well, there's only one way to cook it, and that's medium rare. And my favorite steak is a ribeye over wood, and I think that's the best way. So
Wow. Okay. Oh, you said over wood?
yeah, grilled over oak wood. So
Sounds good.
firewood, Baxter.
Yes, sir. All right. So every episode we have some questions that we think are really good for each guest. So our first, I guess we call them our base questions. Our first base question for you is: will you tell us the events in your life that have shaped you to who you are today?
Yeah, I guess the biggest thing that as far as my life, my parents definitely molded me and shaped me. We didn't have a lot of money back then. I tell my two sons a story of, we got one TV channel, and if you want to get a second one, sometimes you go outside with a pipe wrench and you turn that TV antenna, and you could pick up a channel out of Houston, just depending on the weather conditions. So, we didn't have a lot of money, but mom and dad provided us all we needed, and so I think that core value of bringing me up with values, work ethic with my parents, and then they had high expectations for me as well, and so they taught me a whole lot about those things: work ethic, values, how to treat others too. My dad, he passed away 2 years ago, and we miss him dearly, but he's one that taught me work ethic. He also taught me that, the philosophy of, you scratch my back, I scratch yours. We help others. We try to do more for others than they do for us, kind of a deal. And I think that's what the Lord wants us to do. But that was one thing that shaped my life. Believe it or not, Baxter, I didn't like to talk in front of crowds when I was in high school. Did a little bit of FFA. I was a district officer, but I was scared to death when I had to give a speech. And a couple of things that really probably helped me. One, I worked for a couple of years in my uncle's convenience store, And you think, what does a convenience store have to do with being a beef cattle specialist? But I learned to communicate with people, whether it be, somebody that's the town banker or lawyer, or somebody that's, they're living on the streets, but they come in the store, And so I learned to communicate with a lot of different people and respect people of all shapes and sizes. And so I think that was important as well. And then, whenever I got to college, I went to Blinn, and I always knew I'd have a passion for the beef industry in some form or fashion, because I grew up around my dad and had cattle. And then I took a speech class, and I learned how to put my thoughts together. And from there, I hadn't shut up since. And then, one other thing that was pivotal, that where it kind of changed my life, I met my wife, and we've been married for over 28 years now. And, she really inspired me to do more, and encouraged me to keep on going. If I wanted to teach at the university level or be involved in higher education, I could do it. And so she really supported me and helped me. So, there's a number of events in our life that you can look back, and at the time you're like, how could this help me? But you always have to think that, what shapes us, we may not understand at this point in time, but we'll understand later. So.
Have you been looking for Brahman cattle with a good genetic background? Contact 79 Cattle Company, selling reliable Brahman replacement heifers, Brahman show prospects, and Brahman bulls. Contact Taylor Tate at 210-241-4511. Again, that's 210-241-4511. Or contact Mallory Tate at 210-861-0155, 210-861-0155.
Right, that's definitely true. And you brought up some good points of being respectful and always helping people. And it's truly, I mean, obviously, it's good to know stuff, but it's really who you know, and being able to communicate with people and respect them and help people is a great way to network and get to know people. And that's
Absolutely. I think it's the right thing to do. It's the Christian thing to do. But it also, I mean, you just never know who you may come across one day and inspire them and help them. And years down the road, they may return a favor. And so, so again, it's the right thing to do. But those connections, the people we meet over time, they'll help you down the road. I mean, they can open up doors. If you don't take care of those connections, they can close doors too. So if you're disrespectful or whatever else.
that's right. What goes around comes around.
That's another saying my dad always said. So
It's good. Another question we like to ask guests is, what are your or what traits do you look for when you're selecting cattle?
yeah, I think when we, from a phenotypic standpoint, first, what I like to do, Baxter, if I'm going out, let's just say, and I'm buying bulls for myself or somebody else. The first thing I like to do is I try to look at the data first, look at the EPDs, set my priorities. If I'm strictly a terminal cross and I'm selling my calves at weaning, I'm probably going to focus on weaning and yearling weight, and a little bit of emphasis on calving ease, depending on what kind of cows I've got. If I'm raising replacement females, I'm probably going to be looking at mature cow size as well as milk and those types of things in that. So I've got to set my priorities on the selection side of things with what I'm trying to do. But I look at the data first. And the reason I do that is because then I can say, okay, this bull, he's in the bottom 5% of the breed for calving ease, and I don't need to use him on first calf heifers. Okay. And so I cut him right there. He's not on my list because when I go out and look at them in the pen and start deciding on, okay, which bulls am I going to look at? I'm a sucker for a good looking bull. All right, like we all are. And so, I try to make that decision and only look at the bulls that fit my criteria based on the data, because the data is a very important part of it, especially as we've incorporated genomics into those data analysis and things like that. I'm sure Dr. Herring probably mentioned that in one of the previous podcasts, but that the data is important. So then, okay, so now we're out, we've made that decision. We got 10 bulls to look at. So, we go in and we look at those. I mean, feet and legs are absolutely critical. So that's the first thing that I look at when I'm visually sorting bulls. And again, if the feet aren't right, that means the wheels aren't right on that bull, and we cut him right there. So he doesn't make the cut. Because the problem is, again, we start working our way up to look at the overall body conformation, and we say, man, that's a really good bull. He's stout, big middle, cool looking. He's got all the pieces to make great replacement females for me. But he's only got 3 legs, okay? I'm being joking there. But, I mean, if he doesn't have a good set of wheels and we turn him out with a set of cows, he's not going to be able to breed those cows and not going to have longevity. And that's another thing that we've got to have. We'd like to have on these bulls, to keep them within that herd 5 to 6 years, so we can spread out that initial cost on them. So the first thing is, feet and legs. And then we start, going in and looking at muscle and depth and capacity and overall balance and eye appeal that go along with it. So there's a lot of things. A bull's got to look like a bull. A heifer's got to look like a heifer. And, so those are things. And of course, reproduction is important too in those animals. And we look at that. Oftentimes, I mean, I grade quite a few commercial heifers for contests and different things and sort through heifers for people. One thing that I'm kind of particular on, in addition to feet and legs, is looking at those cattle from behind and looking at pen width in those cattle, especially on the female side. That they've got to have some adequate width in their pens, because that's where the calf's going to come out. But typically, if they're wider in their pens, they're going to be wider throughout their skeleton as well. So, those are, kind of things that, if I go in and I those are hiccup points: feet and legs, pen width, those kind of things. There's a lot of the pieces that come together when you're fine tuning those bulls. And then you just have to set your priorities with what's important in your operation. But I mean, at the end of the day, you got to get calves on the ground. That's the end of the day. And, it doesn't matter how good a bull it is or female it is. If they can't bring calves to the table, you're not going to get a payday.
That's right. Thank you for that. That was great. You covered all the bases for sure. So, I guess now's the part that really excites us, which is the discussion questions, the questions we really hone in on your specific or areas of expertise. And so we're really wanting to focus on efficiency and making sure that everyone's operating their herd to the best of their ability and decreasing waste, but still gaining income. And so, what we kind of want to talk about is the decreasing input cost. And our first question in that area is about decreasing input cost. Is what is an area that you see ranchers that maybe they're spending costs that may not be necessary?
Yeah, I mean, I think that oftentimes, one area that's always a big concern is kind of the things that rust, meaning the iron. So when you have to make equipment decisions, think about, how is that equipment going to affect me, and is it the best investment into that equipment? Whether it be a squeeze chute, whether it be a tractor, a baler. Are there better ways? Because that equipment's an investment, but it also is a cost, because you're going to depreciate that over time, and so that pulls from the bottom line there. And so you kind of have to figure out and look at, well, what do I actually need on my operation? Do I need a 32-foot trailer that I use once a year to haul my calves to the sale barn? Or am I better off with just a little 16-foot trailer that if I've got to take something to the vet and then I hire when the cowboys come and pin my cows, then I pay them to haul my calves to the sale barn? Think about that and how it. So, iron is kind of one of those things that's probably one of the bigger ones that, people invest and put money into and decide whether or not we need it or not. And so I think that's a critical one. I think a lot of times producers, it's probably not as much they spend too much as it is they maybe don't spend in the right areas. Okay. Nutrition. If I get a call from a rancher that is, having some, fertility issues, they didn't get enough cows bred. They think they got a disease problem. Well, the first question I always ask is, well, what's the body condition score of those cows? What kind of condition, how much flesh do they have on them? What's your nutrition program? What's your mineral program? Those kind of things. And in today's market time, when calves are worth $1,500 to $2,000, spending a little extra money on nutrition really pays big dividend.
Infinity Cattle Services, owned by Chris Shivers, is glad to be a sponsor of the Cattle Innovation Station podcast. Infinity Cattle Services, a unique, vision-driven, service-oriented company committed to developing successful revenue-producing cattle operations, is a full-service consulting and marketing firm specializing in Brahman and Brahman-influenced cattle. Contact them today to learn more about how they can assist you with locating cattle, cattle mating, sale management, marketing, communications, record keeping, data submission, and a wide array of other services. They can be reached at 713-202-1747. Again, that's 713-202-1747, or at infinitycattleservices@gmail.com. That is infinitycattleservices@gmail.com. Visit their website at infinitycattle.com or check them out on Facebook and Instagram.
And Baxter and Paul, I think that, we're kind of at a stage in production, and this cycles through over time. Again, 4 years ago, we were trying to minimize every bit of cost we could because our calves just weren't bringing the money. Now so we were more of optimizing, kind of a situation. We can't cut costs too much because if we cut nutrition, things like that, again, it may hurt our fertility and hurt next year's payday. But then now we're almost to the period of time where we're trying to really maximize production as much as possible. And little things that we can spend money on. Maybe a little extra nutrition is not a bad thing if we can increase that percent calf crop by 5%, because the way calves are worth. Maybe we think about implanting. Utilizing a growth implant now. And if you're not going into a natural program or a program that doesn't allow growth implants, they're perfectly safe. There's nothing wrong with them. But if you're not going into a program like that, a calf implant is worth about anywhere from 15 to 20 pounds from when you put it in to when you wean that calf. 20 pounds in today's market, that's about $60-$70. And it costs you $1.25. So that's pretty darn good investment there with that. So I think we really have to, depending on the cycle that we're in the cattle, is we look at these areas that we're, making investments and so on. A prime example, I was working with a rancher here a couple of weeks ago, and they were kind of on the edge of, they were going to try to, they were a 3-bull operation. And so they were kind of in between deciding whether to go ahead and buy another bull because one went bad, are just going with the 2 bull. So they were kind of between a 2 bull and a 3 bull operation size. And, my reply to them was that, yeah, I don't want you to go spend $5,000-$6,000 on a bull that you don't need. But the problem in today's calf market, if 3.5 cows unbred pays for that bull, okay? And so, I think we have to, in today's market and hopefully the next several years cattle market, we've got to take advantage of every little bit of opportunity we can to raise and sell a calf because they're so valuable right now.
That's right. I absolutely agree. And you talked about nutrition, and nutrition is the base function of that animal being as optimal as possible. Without a good nutrition, their health is compromised, their reproduction is compromised, and their gain is compromised because that. So I agree, nutrition is absolutely important, and so that's a great way of refocusing your cost.
Absolutely.
Then, so typically the largest input cost for producers is feed and nutrition cost. And so what is the best way to decrease that cost without sacrificing reproduction or health or any of those other things that come along with nutrition?
Yeah. I knew you'd ask me that question, Baxter, and I'm gonna throw out it depends. All right. But I do think, and again, every operation's different. Okay. And let's just say, for example, whole cottonseed. Whole cottonseed is a great commodity. All right. Feeding it, and we have ranchers that it's gotten a little more expensive, but it's still a great supplemental feed commodity for cow calf producers. The challenge with feeding whole cottonseed is there's a lot of handling capabilities to it. All right. So, for me in my operation, my small operation in the wintertime, when time is essence, because I have my real job that I'm at right here, for me, and I don't have the capabilities to handle that in bulk. I'm not going to, I can't go out there and hand fork cottonseed every other day out there. And my bride of 28 years, she probably wouldn't go do that for me either. Now, what she will do is she can crank up the Mahindra with a cube wagon on the back of it and go and feed those cows that route. Okay. And so I think you have to figure out what system works for you. Again, byproducts or co-products, if you have the opportunity to feed them, you can cheapen up that. But again, depending on the size of your operation, those kind of things. I think it depends on what how many times a day you see your cow, a week you see your cows. If you're not out there but once a week, you're probably going to have some kind of self-fed supplement, whether it be liquid or tubs or salt meal, something like that. Which any of those self-fed are a little more expensive because you're paying for some convenience factor on there. But I think the biggest way to really look at cost and shaving it off is, one, price it per pound of nutrient. Okay, so don't go. Okay, so this company has the cheapest bag of cubes, okay, and per bag. But if I compared it to company B, theirs is a little more expensive per bag. But if I look at the nutrients, company A is just pumping a bunch of fiber into it, that doesn't have any nutritive value. And so I'm better off paying more per bag because I can reduce the amount that I actually have to feed with that. So pricing that per pound of protein and energy, I think, is a good way of doing it. If you bulk too, we have a lot of producers now with bulk bins, whether it be cubes, they can buy a truckload. So there's a lot more producers that are buying these tow sacks, the big super sacks that'll hold half a ton. And those, if you've got a tractor and capabilities, those, they cheapen it up a little bit, especially with bagging, individual 50-pound bagging costs now. So things like that, I think, are some opportunities. But again, you have to be real careful. What we just said, you cut the corners too much, and then we end up with less calves, and that is really costly in today's market.
Right, and that makes absolute sense. You want to cut what you can, but you also don't want to cut what you can't. So, and then I thought you brought up a great point about making sure that even though this may cost more, it's actually costing you less because of the nutrients it's provided. And so I know some people have used that outlook on hay and have fed hay less because of the nutrients, or there's not as much protein and other nutrients in hay. And so what are your thoughts on reducing the amount of hay that you feed?
Yeah, I actually just had this discussion. I met with a producer at their ranch earlier today, and hay has gotten really expensive. And the reason it's expensive is because labor, but you also go and price what a baler costs now, what it did 30 years ago. I mean, you're talking about buying a house now, it seems like, when you're buying a baler. So hay equipment is very expensive, and it's gone up. I think we're like $27, $28 for custom hay baling now, whereas, when I started my career out, it was more like $12. And so that cost. So I think, and I actually myself and Dr. Redmond did some work at Overton when I was out there back in 2003. We did some stockpile forages, and so instead of taking that last hay cutting in the fall and getting that hay off the ground before frost, we just let it frost. We grew it starting about 1st of September, middle of August, and then we started grazing it when we got into November, and we found that once that frost hit it, the protein value stayed there essentially, and let those cows graze that, and then supplement accordingly with that. So and there was a couple of those years that on the one ranch, I think we fed hay for 2 weeks because we also incorporated ryegrass into the system too. And so again, we shortened that hay feeding down to about 2 weeks, but most years it was about 30 to 45 days is all that we fed that hay. Again, that doesn't fit every operation. I would say that if you are in the hay feeding side of things, it's important to pull a sample on that hay and see what's in it, nutritive wise. And then you can make your supplementation decisions based off of that, because you may be overfeeding, and in some cases, if that hay quality is good enough, and depending on the cow, the stage of production, you may not have to supplement at all to those cows. So I think those are cost-cutting ways that we can look at, and more precision in our strategies of how we feed cows. Um, you know, as some people say, well, you need to put up the best quality hay or buy the best quality hay, and I think that depends. I mean, I have bought some very inexpensive year-old hay that I got really priced right, but I knew that I was going to have some waste because it had set outside. So I factored that loss into the pricing. But then I also knew that I was going to have to supplement more on the cube side of my supplemental feeding. But at the end of the day, it was all about what it cost me per cow per day. Okay. So you have to kind of look at that and figure out what your costs are associated with it. The worst thing you can do is buy sorry hay and pay a lot of money for it. So.
Absolutely. And then we just talked about some costs that you have to make. And we know that we're gonna have to buy nutrition, and we know we're gonna probably have to buy stuff like that. But what about the costs that we don't know that are coming? Like our tractor broke down.
Yeah.
Or one of our bulls just died from a disease and we need to buy a new one. How do we prepare for these unexpected expenses like that?
Yeah, great question, Paul. And I think you're you're seeing that, and ranchers have just gone through a cycle where they have delayed maintenance. All right, on things, anything from fences to labor necessary to pick up dead trees to new tractor or overhauling a tractor, because we went through that period from about 14, or actually about probably 16. There was about a 7-year period where things were pretty lean. All right. And so ranchers, they delayed having to do some of those things. And so now, because calf prices are high, now there's that opportunity to invest that money back into some of these long-term assets that need to be fixed. And you got to do that, for one, to keep up with the maintenance and all those kind of things. Also set some of that money aside for those unknown expenses that occur, whether a bull dies or whatever. But then you also, you really need to look at it from a tax perspective. Looking at, okay, if I don't go ahead and spend, I'm getting crazy prices for my calves. I'm getting 3 times what I got 7 years ago, 6 years ago, or double to 3 times. If I don't invest it back in the ranch, I'm just going to have to pay IRS for it. And so I think that's what ranchers are doing right now is, you're seeing some upkeep, some fencing, some different things. We're reinvesting it back into the operation.
Yes, sir. Well, I can't believe it, but we're already ready to wrap this episode up and start the next one. So this has been a great first section. We'll be back on June 15th for the second episode, but this has been great. Thank you for joining us. Paul, anything we need to cover before we go? Thank you for joining us. Oh, go ahead.
That was great talk about decreasing our inputs and just
Absolutely, and we'll come back and continue talking about efficiency and increasing profit in your herd. So thank you for joining us, and keep innovating the cattle industry. Signing off.
If you truly want your livestock to perform at their best, make sure to contact Vance Aaron, the owner and operator of AFL Livestock Solutions. Vance specializes in magnawave treatments that use pulsed electromagnetic fields, or PEMF, to relieve pain, swelling, and inflammation, caused to help your livestock feel their best. In addition to livestock, Vance can also help you feel better. His treatment works great on sore muscles and joints, along with other mobility issues. His treatments are FDA approved to treat migraines. Aaron Family Livestock Solutions has helped many exhibitors make it to the backdrop with their proven MagnaWave treatments. Don't miss your next backdrop picture. Give Vance a call at 903-720-3184. Again, that's 903-720-3184. Or find them on Facebook at AFL Livestock Solutions. Hello guys, thank you for listening to the Cattle Innovation Station podcast. We want to make this podcast better, so if you would, please like this episode and leave us feedback in the comment section. Something else that helps make this podcast better is when you respond to the polls. So if you're able, please respond to our polls. Help us make this podcast as good as possible. Thank you, God bless, and have a good day.
Thank you for listening to the Cattle Innovation Station podcast.
we hope you enjoyed the show.
We're your hosts, Baxter Whitworth.
And Paul Hayes.
Remember our key verse, Proverbs 16:3.
Commit to the Lord whatever you do, and He will establish your plans.
Thank you for listening.